and welcome back to today's episode. My name is Ron Simpson. I'm a creative entrepreneur from Amsterdam, and we have a stellar lineup of guests as promised with today Dieter Veldsman. And I know how to pronounce that because we are both in the Netherlands at the moment. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks, Ron. Lovely to be with you.
It's amazing to have you here. We're going to take a deep dive into the world of talent acquisition, AI, workforce strategy, and absolutely everything in between. I hope you're ready for that. There's going to be some jokes too. I'm just warning you. Because we're listening to get inspired, we're listening to hear all this news and insights, but we just want to be entertained a little bit as well. So, from data to disruption, we're covering it all. Please buckle up and let's get ready. Because I've read your bio and I've read absolutely
Yeah.
everything, but for everyone who's been living under a rock that doesn't know the academy or the fact that you're a professor in South Africa and doing all this cool shit, could you explain exactly who you are and what you do as if we were at a party?
As if we were at a party, right? I would probably start by saying I'm the chief HR scientist at the Academy to Innovate HR. And as much as I would love to say that that means I do some freaky experiments in a lab somewhere, that's actually not what it means.
Are
But
you sure?
well, maybe from time to time, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So
Let's keep it real.
from my side, that means I am responsible for, we're a platform focused on career development for HR professionals globally. And I'm responsible for a lot of our insights work, a lot of our thought leadership, as well as then understanding what are the challenges that our clients are facing in the HR world and how can we help them solve through skills development going forward. So a little bit boring probably for a party, that last part, but that's typically what I get up to.
I wouldn't say it's boring. I would say it's long. I don't know if that fits on a business card, but I get that. And now besides that, like personally, and how would you describe yourself as a person? Because we're talking human capital, right?
Yeah, of course, right. So I think I'm somebody that's fascinated by the behavior of other human beings, whether that's in their personal lives or in their professional lives. Someone that loves the outdoors, love nature, and yeah, just kind of love to see how people set up their lives and the decisions that they make that makes them happy.
Cool. So I want to talk a lot about strategy and innovation with you today,
Yeah.
but obviously it's also a lot about resumes and that type of stuff. So I'm sure you have a very long resume, but what would be the top three shining items on it?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a little bit of I think, a very diverse career. So maybe let me put it that way: that the three shiny items would be on the one side. I have a bit of an academic career, so I'm a professor of practice, which means that I lecture and involved in a lot of research priorities. The second part is I'm an ex-chief HR officer, so I looked after a global business from an HR point of view, looking after Asia, Africa, and the United Kingdom. And on the other side, I am the chief scientist, as I've mentioned, at AIHR, so building a lot of frameworks about the future of HR and the future of work. And I'm a published author. I've just released a book a couple of months ago, and there's another two on the way that will release before the end of 2025.
Holy shit. Okay, so do I call you Chief from now on, or can I just say Dieter?
Ether is perfectly okay, no worries.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so we've discussed all that shines on your resume, which is quite a lot. What would be the one thing that should actually be on there that is not on there? What do we need to know about you, also professionally or something? Are you amazing at, I don't know, folding paper planes or saving the world or running backwards?
I think I am amazing at seeing how other people have designed wonderful PowerPoint slides and then reusing them for myself without having to design them on my own. So
Ooh,
my team
tu
always
es
teaches me
chief
about that.
artist.
Well, the chief collector of other people's art. Let us put it that way.
I would definitely put that on a resume. That sounds like you're saving me time. That's a smart thing to do. Um, so yeah, are you ready to dive right in? Are you ready to,
Yeah, let's go for it.
get the people what they want, which is kind of important, I think. Because there's a big question, like when it comes to the whole transformation of talent acquisition, right? There's a lot going on. Workforce strategy, the whole AI thing, the automatization thing, the shortage thing, like everyone in the world is looking at all these trends and problems. How do you think you as a person or you with your company or wherever you
Mm.
partner up with make an actual impact, and in which part of these fields would that be?
Yeah, great question, right? So, as I said before, our universe is the human resources professional, and I define that very broadly, right? It's people working in talent, people working in learning and development, in HR, and in organizational development. So, basically, anybody that's working in the people science. I think we make a massive difference in helping and enabling those people to have the skills to guide and help their organizations in the times that we find ourselves. So, to make that really practical, when we have to talk about how is AI going to impact an organization, there has to be a people science HR person in the room that says, but that's got a real impact on people. And we make a contribution about giving that particular individual the skill sets that they require to be confident in those conversations. So for me, it's very much around how do we prepare the HR workforce to guide the organizations and to kind of shape that next chapter of work.
So very much inside out, right? You look from a company strategy and you say, hey, these are the tools you will need to make sure that you are future proof with everything that is coming.
Yeah, and I think it goes both ways, right? So inside out, how do we give you the skill to be able to have that impact? And then outside in, what's happening in the external world that then feeds the new things that you need to learn over time. So for me, it's all about, if somebody walks to me up to me in a couple of years' time and said, the stuff that you and AIHR did made me relevant and impactful, I think we would have done a great job.
Well, that sounds like a compliment to get. Do you think, like for any company at the moment, would it be a strategy based on like the most brilliant and most talented and best people in the world, or just a really good strategy that could give tools to, a way bigger group than that to actually get the work done?
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with strategy, right? So I think it's something that we spend a hell of a lot of time on, but I think we don't necessarily translate that into the day-to-day practical realities of what are we going to do. Let's be honest, strategy crafting is not that difficult. We can all come up with great plans, but are we able to translate them into what we need now and how we shift and move the organization forward? I think we are at an interesting point in how organizations think about their future with things like AI, etc. Around what does that next chapter for them look like and how they're going to get there. I personally don't think it's just a couple of brilliant minds that'll get us there. I think we are actually facing an era where it's about workforce transformation and who the workforce is and who's going to be doing the work going forward. And an example I always love to use is we talk about how AI is going to impact work, and it most definitely will. So, what are we going to do with regards to the global workforce? Because this is
I'm sorry,
unleashed
let's go back for, I'm a very simple person. You just said 70.
70%. There's still a lot of people that are not operating in this domain that we talk about whenever we talk about the digital reality of the world. Now, a lot of that sure sits in the developing world, but when we look at how economies are also growing and where a massive opportunity is in future, those
Hmm.
are the types of markets that we should also be talking about. So I think it's not just a couple, it's about how do we do this for the broader masses and what that's going to look like.
That's an interesting take because it feels like all these problem shifts and trends are sort of in a bubble. And actually, if 70% is outside of that, is that also what holds a lot of businesses back? Like you can figure out how to be cutting edge for everything and everyone inside of that bubble when it comes to innovation or automatization or use of AI. But sometimes, people look at companies and they're like, why didn't they just make this big strategic move? Or why didn't they use this tool? Is this one of the reasons?
I think it most definitely is. And think about it from the external point of view. It also means that a whole bunch of your consumers are not yet operating in that domain, right? So I think as a company, the target market will shift a lot in future. And then from the internal point of view, I think sometimes we forget that there's still a very big part of the workforce, if you think frontline, blue collar, etc., that don't necessarily operate in all these different domains. And I think we need to think very holistically about that. We've been skewed towards workforce innovations being very knowledge worker based, and that's not the
Yeah.
majority of the people that actually forms part of the workforce. And I think it is an inhibiting factor, and we are at a tipping point where the great innovations we're seeing now around technology and talent and all those things can either bring us together and I think build a stronger future, or it can continue to divide us even further. And I think that's the big risk that we need to ask ourselves kind of at a macro and societal level.
So yeah, do we want AI and tech to create, even more space between workers and thinkers, right?
Yeah.
Very, very simply said. I think that's a very interesting insight. You also said 70% is not online, so trends outside of the bubble are interesting as well. If AI tech, automatization, shortage, and all these things would be part of that bubble, which trends would you see outside of that bubble? What is going on in that 70% that is not online?
Yeah, I think, there's still a very strong reality. I sometimes smile, whenever we talk about things like employee value propositions, people work for different reasons and they work to get different things done, right? So for some people, it's a vocation. They just love what they do. It's the reason they wake up. For other people, work is a reality because I need to feed my family, and this is what was available in my current context and in my particular environment. So I think there's also trends with the relationship that people have with work is starting to change, and that fits outside of that bubble. It happens there as well, but I think it's actually shifting, to go a lot more beyond that. And I think it will be interesting to see, because for me in the talent market, what's going to be interesting over the years to come is how does that relationship shift between employers and employees and the decisions that people make around why I want to work for a particular company. Because maybe it's the only company in my community, I've got no other choice, but that's got a significant impact on my engagement and my motivation. Or if I do have a
Absolutely.
different choice, am I willing enough to vote with my feet and go elsewhere if, this isn't something that aligns with what I actually want?
That's a very strong insight. Actually, this whole conversation with you up until now has been one big aha moment for me, right? I'm like, aha, okay, so this makes sense. Um, what would have been your aha moment? I mean, you're, in the trenches, you're all the way deep inside of this industry. Which tool or strategy or move or even thought or concept gave you a real aha moment when it comes to, moving forward within HR?
So I think there's maybe a couple there. I think maybe the first aha insight, especially in the HR space, was I think we haven't done a great job over the years of redefining what HR's mandate is going to be in the future of work. So practically, what do I mean by that is very often, and that's why I smiled at the beginning when you asked me, how would I describe myself at a party? If somebody asks you, very few HR professionals are kind of standing up proud to say, I'm in HR, because what's the response you get? Can you look at my CV? Do you have opportunities? I'm struggling with a really
I
difficult
was just
boss.
about to ask, could you take a look at my CV?
Exactly,
But
right.
yeah,
So
okay,
it's very
no,
much
thank
still
you
the
for clearing
hire
that.
fire mentality that a lot of people have. But that, yes, that's part of what HR does. But HR is so much more than that today. So that for me was a massive insight that not everybody sees HR for the value driver that it can be, and very often that it's the baggage of the past that holds it back. I never realized how that actually plays out in practice, because you deal a lot with the strategic work from HR, strategic talent, etc. But for a lot of people, that reality is still very transactional, very operational. Still, they jump into the boardroom when I see HR coming because it means I'm in trouble. So that was quite a, I think a big insight for me. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because it always feels like HR is for the company, and they always say we're for the people, right? So I think that also for me personally, when I used to work in corporate, that was always the vibe. And I'm a marketeer.
Hmm.
I believe everything is marketing anyway. So I've personally seen quite a big rebranding of HR lately. I don't think I've heard the word HR at a party anymore, right? People would say all kinds of different things like I work in human capital or I
Yeah,
work
yeah.
in, you know.
No, you're right. I think, I've often said, HR departments have got a PR problem, because I think you need some repositioning on your reputation, etc. And it's fine for me if we change the name, whether we call it people and culture, whether we call it human capital, whether we call it, operations, people experience, etc. But are we fundamentally changing the mandate and the type of work we do with the rebranding of the name? Otherwise, it just feels like the same old thing, but we're just dressing it up in a new sexy term, which I don't think helps in the
Lipstick on a pig. There we go. Finally
run
got to use that
exactly.
one in context. Yeah, just changing packaging. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not
doesn't
good
help.
enough, right? We need the product to move. So I know you don't have a crystal ball, or at least I'm hoping you don't, because life is more
Too
fun
good to
without
know.
it. But where would you see talent acquisition and the whole HR tech heading in the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting time there, because I think what we are already starting to see is high level of personalization starting to take place, just given some new technologies that coming into play. So, you mentioned you're a marketeer. I think on the talent acquisition side, we're starting to take a lot of lessons from marketing and how you actually would nurture a customer during the different stages of the funnel. And I think that's fundamentally changing the way that talent acquisition is not just about the interviews I have and the engagements. It's a lot more about the brand building, the visibility, the credibility in the market, and what leads toward that decision for people to want to engage with you as a brand. when I talk about the personalization pieces, I think you're starting to deal with talent that expects things to be more outbound, tailored to their preferences, a lot more
Mhm.
targeted. And that is definitely going to change the way that we segment and think about the talent market and who we're trying to attract. I see different messaging from the same organization going out to cater for different profiles. And I don't think it's going to be a standardized experience anymore. I think it will be highly personalized with memorable moments that we put out, and we'll have the technology to be able to do that at scale. And I think that's interesting to see how it changes.
I think that's interesting as well. Do you think, because of this, right, we're doing more volume, we're doing more access points and data points to figure out the targeting for every specific person, whether it's language or
Mm.
whatever it is. That's a lot of work. So, do you think the traditional sort of hiring practice will be replaced by tech?
I think a lot of it will be. I think we've already seen massive automation in that space over the last couple of years, right? And I think in the HR space, at least with AI adoption, sourcing, talent acquisition, recruitment has been one of the areas that's been targeted and focused on first. So we see a lot of use cases in that environment already. Of course, there's some legislative things we need to sort out and figure out from an ethics point of view there as well. But I think
Yeah.
to do high level personalization that's data and evidence driven at scale, you do need a different approach with a different technology stack that's actually driving that over time. And to be honest, you need a different HR skill set that looks at that in a very, very different way. It's not just about the process, it's about the experience that I'm trying to create and how can I use what I've got available to its utmost effect.
Or even the result, right,
Spot
of
on.
that whole process or the whole thing. Like it's just we're trying to achieve something, and these are tools. So for me, I was always like wondering, me as a marketer, I was just looking at this market like, okay, how long will it take before AI writes a resume, then sends it to an AI who reads the resume, then responds, and they're just going to have a conversation, and then at the end, I just walk into a room, right?
Yeah.
And like, hey, I think our computers like each other.
Mm.
Let's go.
And I mean, you're absolutely correct that we're already starting to see, experimentation and things like AI-based interviewing and like CV screening, etc. I
Mhm.
sometimes wonder if the converse is not going to happen around the fact that people are going to seek authenticity and human touch a lot more. And sure, you can't do it at every single step and every single stage of the process, but actually be attracted to that a lot more. I think what's going to be clever for organizations to think about is for what talent in which segment do I want to create a high touch experience versus where it's just about volumes and efficiency and making sure that I get people through,
Yeah.
the pipeline. And I think that's an interesting conversation that we can have that goes beyond standardization of practice and process. But
Yep.
around what do I want to create?
There's music on the streamers, and there's a vinyl record that someone loves dearly. I
Spot
think
on,
it's one.
exactly.
It's
Great
it's exactly
analogy.
what it should be. Um, so listen, man, you're doing so many things, right? On the one hand, you're busy with innovation. On the other hand, you're busy with tech. On the other hand, you're teaching. You're doing all these cool things. So looking ahead, what's currently on your strategic workforce agenda? Let's say for the next 24, 36 months.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? I think there's a couple of things that I ponder about a lot. Maybe if I can start there,
Okay,
if
yeah,
that
start there.
influences, right? So I think, rightly so, AI is all the buzz, but I think over the next 24 to 36 months, it's about figuring out how do we make it practical and sustainable. And I think there's a lot of questions there. So, on not only my plan, but also us as a business, is what does all in on AI look like for us? What does that mean? And how do we make that real and practical for both our members and ourselves? I think
Hmm.
that's for me quite a big question. The second one is, we play a lot in the learning and development domain for HR professionals. And I think a big one is we are battling for people's attention, and that's become even more so. So, how do we create those meaningful moments that matter for people in the flow of work and in the flow of life? Because I think we are competing with various, content channels, and I think people are getting completely overwhelmed. So, if human development's
Yeah.
important, where and when do we do it? And I think that's quite an interesting one. And as I said before, I think there's never ever been a better time to be in HR than now, but the next 24 to 36 months requires significant shifts in mandate, how we put our operating models in place, and how we are going to reposition ourselves as we enter this new, call it AI driven organizations of the future.
I think it's very interesting because in the marketing world, we've been discussing this forever, right? The
Mm.
attention economy and everyone's
Yeah.
fighting for the same seconds and minutes, right? It's interesting that that even reaches HR professional at a global,
Yeah,
scale. To me, it's the like the big shadow thing that is just eating the world at the moment. Is like who gets your attention
yeah,
and also the retention and therefore the engagement, which I think is interesting to see that from an HR perspective as well. At the same time, speaking of things that are getting our attention, like the world has probably always been on fire, but it feels more on fire than ever, right? There's so much going
yes,
on,
yeah,
whether it's wars or it's
mhm,
tariffs or it's Lord knows what's going on. And together with the speed of like the development of things like AI, but mostly the communication around
mm,
things like AI, right? You wake up every day, five new tools, five new this,
right.
five new that. Um, Looking at that, would you say it would be smarter to shorten your like future plans and like maybe in the past we would do 5 year plans and 3 year plans. Maybe it should now be three in one, or maybe it should turn into months. I don't know. How do you see that? Do you think we are strong enough to predict the future when it comes to strategy within this industry, or we should actually adapt to way more, flexible
Yeah.
look?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the typical psychologist answer on that one, right? In terms of that, it depends, and it's an and or that we would probably need to do. I think
Mhm.
in times that we are living in now, that's very turbulent, and with change happens quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of very, big disruptive events, and you can kind of list and name what's happened over the 12 months there. I think it's even more important to be very clear as an organization on your purpose and your reason for existence. And I think that's a long term thing that you aspire to over time. The other side of that is that the world is changing too quickly to be that predictable and that static. So I think in your strategies, you need to build in a lot more scenario based thinking. So, what happens when these various futures start to occur? And then I think you do need to review it on a more regular cycle because strategy is no longer a 3 year or a 5 year plan. I think purpose definitely is, but I think strategy has become something that we look at a lot more frequently to make sure we're still making the right decisions on what we say yes and no to in order to be able to move our organization along. So I think there's a little bit of both around being nimble in execution, but also on the other side, knowing when and where to kind of chat about, the strategic stuff.
Yeah.
Not being rigid, I think, is going to be a key thing for any organization over the next couple of months.
Yeah, I think purpose gives you direction. It gives
Yeah,
you, a compass to know where you're going. But then on that path could be anything. You need to be nimble. You need flexibility to be able to adapt to that. I think you see that more with people as well.
mm,
Obviously, organizations and companies they're bigger and therefore slower to move and innovate. But in people, I see it all the time. Like someone could reposition themselves
yeah,
every week, every day, which I think is interesting. And to me, that is what companies should look out for as well. Like be the company you need to be to
yeah.
achieve your purpose. I think that's a very interesting thing. Now, listen, I just want I need a hard answer, right? We're just doing one,
Are you
we're
putting me on the
doing,
spot?
yes, but it's a very easy question, but it is game show style. So, do you believe traditional long-term planning is dead? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Same. Now I could listen to you like forever, but I also know that you're going to be a speaker at a very cool event right here in Amsterdam in September, which I think is cool. And it's basically like HR. It has this incredibly long name, which I'm going to repeat for everyone. It's going to be the Global Talent Strategy and Intelligence Conference,
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
We need to find they need to make a short little version of that. But it's going to be cool. It's going to be 3 days. You're going to be on stage. There's going to be amazing other speakers as well. Now imagine, right? The world changes and you can only use one slide. What will be on it?
On my slide, I would talk. Oh, that's a very good question, actually. Yeah, I would talk about what are the scenarios for the future that we need to consider in terms of our talent strategies. If I only had one slide, I would say there's three possible futures. What are the ones that we think is going to start to happen, and how do we prepare today to be ready for whichever one of the futures, becomes the reality over time?
So there's three. Okay, we're not going to give all three away. Just tease one. Tease one of them and come to the event to hear the other two. Let's go.
Yeah, so I think the one is, a talent, international talent mobility is in a situation where, given global conflict, people are less mobile than what they were before, and the workforce becomes a lot more distributed. How do we work in that reality where you can't get your people together, and you are working with colleagues sitting together, even though their countries might be in conflict with each other? What does that look like? So I think those are the types of things that we need to think about in the talent world.
I think you're absolutely right. I can't wait to hear the other two. Um, Another sort of game show question, I guess, right? Short, sweet answer. Are you more of a data person or a gut feeling person?
Data, definitely. Every day of
Why?
the week.
Data for breakfast. Yeah. Why?
So, I think there's a couple of reasons for that, right? I think we are all, as human beings, we are biased and we have our own beliefs and assumptions about the world. And as much as I think that makes us beautiful, interesting human beings, it also sometimes makes us limited in what we think the current reality is. Having said that, though, I think data helps us cut through a lot of that noise, but data in isolation is not useful. It's for me about data in context. So, data is something that informs and phrases our thinking and helps us to see new possibilities as part of that. And I'm very much on how do we combine what you know yourself with the data that you see, and how does that generate a new insight for you that wasn't something that you thought about before?
So it's about thinking and knowing. I haven't heard feeling one time. So is feeling out of HR?
Of course not. So it's obviously part and parcel to what we do, but I think it is also about, making sense. So for me, sense making is a big, big part of that. How do we make sense of what's happening to us? And that combines, thinking, feeling, and doing. If you want to think about them in a little triangle.
I like triangles. That's good. And since you are very data driven, like what would be the three most important data points to look at? Which one matter the most?
Well, I almost want to answer it in a little bit of a different way. I would say, what are the three questions that you're asking, that you should rather be asking yourself, and then to go and look at the data in that context? Because I think we make the
Okay.
mistake of being obsessed with the data and not so much with the questions that we need to ask. If you're working in talent management today, I think you should be asking, what can our workforce in the future do? How is that different than what we have today? And what should we put in place today to bridge that gap? I think those are three crucial questions you should always be asking yourself when you're thinking about the future of talent management and talent insights. The data points that answer those questions will differ from time to time depending on who you are as an organization, but I think the questions stay the same.
That's very true. And I think that's also like I believe in data a lot, but I believe in
Mm.
feelings too. And the thing I think is interesting is that data by itself is nothing, right? It's all about the
Mm.
analytics of the data. And those are the tools to create the stories in which we present the data. So do you think a lot of data stories are like, corrupted, colored, or, beneficial from the presenter? Or do you think that data is the fundamental truth of what people are using it for?
So I think we fall into the trap, that you've mentioned a little bit, that we get so sucked into the data itself that we forget that, data is a vehicle to achieve something else. So whenever we talk about, utilizing data to tell stories, we always say, but what is the question you're asking? What is the answer that you are trying to explore? And then what is the action that you want people to take? Utilize the data in the narrative and in the story to be able to get there. There's a very big difference between what is interesting from a data point of view versus what is useful, and it's not always the same. I've been in boardrooms where they build beautiful, like, data driven packs that is not useful at all, versus somebody
In
else
real
that comes in
time
exactly by
dashboards.
dashboarding and slicing and dicing and everything. And then I've been in other rooms where people bring in two slides that's based on some data insights that they've done, and it sparks a full day conversation on decisions that we need to make. So I think it is about seeing things in context, as I've mentioned, but don't drown in the data. Rather, spend time in the insight and in the sense making and what is the action that we wanted to take. Because data needs to move things. It's not about keeping things, static, and it's not just about looking back. It's about what do we know about the past through the data that can help us with conversations for the future.
I think that's a brilliant quote. Data needs to move things. I like that. I'm putting that on a t-shirt. Is that okay?
Go for it, by all means.
Okay. Happy to. Um, so there's also a lot of systems. We're talking about data. We're talking about, the attention economy. We're talking about all these things. So there's almost no way to not discuss social online platforms or digital online platforms, right? So in
Mm.
the world of HR, obviously there are things like LinkedIn, there are things like Indeed. What is your take on these platforms?
So I think they play a very important part of the talent ecosystem, if I can call it that, of the future. I think
Hmm.
you earlier made the point to say, if any platform or technology, remember what it is. It is a tool in the context of something else that does need to happen. I think where they play a massive role is for the first time, HR professionals are able to reach a bigger part of the workforce in a way that is a lot more, as I've said before, personalized and scalable. And I think
Hmm.
on the other side, it does allow us with the opportunity to engage with people in a very different way and be able to kind of gather them in a very different way and communicate with them. I think what it should never be is just about the technology. And I think the technology is not something to hide behind, if I can call it that, that kind of
Yeah.
replaces the human connection that we want to create in the organization. But, I think massively technology has already changed talent and HR significantly and will continue to do so. I always just ask people around, is the technology driving what you do, or are you using the technology to drive what you actually wanted to achieve? Because it's two very, very different things. I think we can get stuck on, I have tool X that can do X, Y, Z, so that becomes my strategy, which I think isn't correct, versus I want to achieve this. Which tool can help me get there, or combination of tools, and how do I put them into play? And I think that is what the important focus should be.
I would call that uncommon sense,
Yeah, uncommon sense like that. It's probably
right?
stronger word you can also use.
Yeah, yeah, true. But marketing. Anyway, um, these platforms, when I compare them to other, more social driven
Hmm.
mass audience things, they are a little bit lacking,
Hmm.
right? Because they don't have the same amount of users, and so they develop less tech, or maybe they have different preferences. But how do you think these platforms need to evolve? What would you add if you could? If you were the master of LinkedIn, what would you add?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer it in two ways, right? So the first one is, and I hear this a lot from employees where they say, why when I engage with your HR technologies, it feels like 1960, but when I'm outside, it feels like I'm in 2025. Why aren't we applying the same consumer based principles when we build technologies for consumers that we do when we build for employees? I would
Mhm.
argue that employees spend X amount of time at work, the type of technology that they need to utilize also kind of needs to give that intuitive experience. The same things that you would think about in marketing, the hooks you want to build in, the way that the technology operates, it being intuitive, etc. So I think that's a crucially important thing. The second thing, you ask then, what would I do differently about the current technologies? We do need to get a point, and I know that for commercial reasons, people don't want to go that way, but where these technologies start playing a lot better with each other and stops confusing the employee on the other side. There's still so many employees where organizations have great HR technology, but it's not integrated. It gives a fragmented employee experience. I have to swap between different systems to do different things. Some things are available in this channel and not in another channel. So for me, it would start with understanding who the employee is as a consumer of the technology, and then actually designing for them in that way that's a lot more integrated and just makes a lot more sense.
Rich, you have a fan by now. Okay. I think those are really legit. I think those are interesting involvements as well because to me it feels like the consumer experience world is blurring.
Yeah.
Right. We expect the same sort of level of communication from major entertainment, whether it's Netflix or Nike. And we expect that now from our dentist and from our employer, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very strong realization that people need to understand that if it's not that cool, that they lose attention and engagement.
Yeah.
So cool is sort of the new basic, which I think is an
Yeah.
interesting thing.
I speak to a lot of HR people and they'll say, oh, our self service in the organization is really, really terrible. Why are we not getting traction and adoption? Would you use it if you had to buy it with your own money? It's a question I often ask my, HR teams and some of our clients. I said, if HR was a product, would you buy it with your own money? Would you recommend it to somebody else and would you continue to use it? Typical consumer questions. If your question is,
Yeah.
to be honest, I wouldn't really buy it because it's not good enough, then why on earth are you expecting people to really adopt and to utilize it. So I think that thinking has to change, quite a bit.
Yeah, I had used actually the same principles when it comes to like social media
Mm.
content and things. Talked to a lot of brands and a lot of companies who try to translate whatever they're doing to content to reach consumers, and I'm like, why on earth would I follow you? You're
Yeah,
a,
spot on.
you know, with all respect, I don't know why if you're a plumber, why should I be following you on social media?
Yeah,
There are ways to do it, but there's more ways not to do it, right?
spot on.
And it doesn't really matter if you're a plumber or anything else. It's just like the question why? Would you use it yourself? Would you follow it yourself? Would you buy it yourself? I think that's a very, very good tool. I think you are absolutely spot on. Now, you seem like a very clever man that knows a few things. So everyone knows Indeed, and everyone knows LinkedIn, and there's probably a whole bunch of other platforms that you all know. But what is like, who are the new kids on the block? Who's the most exciting company or most exciting tool or person that you know that we should know about?
Well, that's a little bit of a question, putting me on the spot there, right? So, um, I think there's a lot of interesting things that's being done in two places, right? So I think companies that are playing very extensively in like the skills based market and utilizing AI insights there. So I think, companies like TechWolf, I think companies like Gloat, I think they do a really good job. Fuel 50, kind of thinking very differently about your internal talent landscape. And not to, kind of promote any brands there or not, but I would keep an eye and a watch on the young up and coming HR tech companies that don't have the legacy to build that they need to fall back on. And that's really open to building in what we've discussed today, this new consumer focused, intuition type of technology that is really focused on the experience that we want to create. I think people that compete in that domain, I think they're going to be the ones that really get ahead.
Okay, and without promoting any brands, could you accidentally name some?
I think that there's going to be different ones, right? Depending on what you do. I think what is interesting, and maybe not to name any, what I think is interesting is that it's not the natural big ERP players that are the fastest with the innovation. Driving especially the talent landscape. I think it's a lot more the smaller to medium sized players that's coming out with really really interesting things. I would probably say a word of caution though. I think at the moment everybody is using AI and it masquerades as stuff that's not necessarily AI. So, I think those would be things just to watch out for.
It's an amazing political answer without accidentally
Very
naming
diplomatic.
absolutely anyone. Okay, let's try this again. You are a professor. I'm a student. I need help. I'm failing. Who should I, where should I watch? What do I type in? Like, help.
So I maybe let me answer it differently. Who do I keep an eye on? Right. So
Yes. Who would you
right.
keep an eye
Who
on?
do I
There we
keep
go.
an eye on? Like I said before, I keep an eye on a lot of the AI skills companies. So yeah, I think TechWolf, for example, I think they are doing
Yeah.
really interesting things. I think Gloat is doing really interesting things. I do think Indeed, etc., is doing interesting things. They've been doing a lot of new innovations, that we've also started to see come out there, which I think is quite interesting. It's a vendor that we also utilize, but I keep an eye on what Lenosity is doing in the learning landscape and how we measure, impact-based learning, which I
Hmm.
think they're also shifting things. And then a company I love to follow, which I think is just good from a market insights point of view, is Revelio Labs. I think they do really excellent work on labor and market insights that I personally also follow for a lot of talent trends and talent insights. So I would, as
Thank
the
you for
professor
not
to the
promoting
student,
anyone.
to say go
Thank you for
there.
not promoting them. Yeah.
Go there, see
One
what those
eye.
people are
Yeah.
doing, but I think they're busy with some good stuff.
I feel you. Well, thank you for that. I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people to figure that one out. Um, Actually, the last subject I want to touch upon probably is shortage, right?
Mm.
This whole conception of there's a shortage in the marketplace. We can't find the right talents. Is that about innovating to find them or finally getting the basics right to find them? What would you say?
I think there's a little bit of both there in the sense that I think the way that we've always thought about how we designed work needs to change because I think we've put this in the container of a job and people need to be able to do absolutely everything that fits into a job. And I
Hmm.
don't think that's a reality anymore. So I think we are selling ourselves short. So the way we design work, I think, needs to change to be more realistic for the type of skills that the market has and then that's able then to actually utilize skills in a different way. So what do I mean by that is you might not have all 10 skills that's required in one particular job. Might be very scarce to find, but if I break that down into three different skills clusters that you have, maybe I've got three people that can do those three different elements. So I think it's more about bringing the world of org design and workforce planning together with the world of talent acquisition, together with the world of talent development, and kind of starting to think about those different areas because they're very fragmented at the moment. You know, we think about our strategic workforce plan. Do we really tie that into what our talent acquisition people are telling us about the market and what skills they're starting to find more difficult, to source? And then I think on the other side, to your point, I think there's some basics that will never change, right? So how do we use the data to understand the skills market? How do we bring that
Hmm.
across in terms of where we go and search and find for things? And, I think we're in a position where there's so much intelligence out there. There's a great company that, for example, changed their talent strategy. They've got multiple locations. They realized in location A, they're just not finding the particular skill set. So they actually moved the division to somewhere else, working together remotely in a different way to an area where that skill set was actually available. So I think it's about making some of those calls, but being, very realistic and pragmatic about some of those things. Because I think we have the skills in the world that we need and that we can develop, but I think we are not necessarily have the packaging of what we are looking for. So maybe the packaging, which is a little bit the traditional work and job architecture, is the problem.
Yeah. So is global hiring and remote working the answer and solution to shortage?
I think it's one of the strategies to look at. I think, if I can't find something in location X, maybe I need to look somewhere else. And obviously that provides me with, different opportunities. I'm not saying that it is the only answer. I think there has to be a lot more talk between organizations and industries as well as then tertiary education institutions. What are the skill sets that we are actually producing and what does the education system look like that will give us the skill set we require for the future? So for me, it's about how do we build that pipeline for the next couple of generations, whilst to the generation that's currently in the workforce, how do we start thinking differently about utilizing the skills that's currently available? So, remote work, I think it's a very important part of your talent strategy, not the only one. And obviously, there's a lot of nuance to that depending on who you are as an employer. But personally, I think it has to be a conversation at least around what is your stance on it.
Amazing. I agree. I have the best question in the world waiting for you. You ready?
Can't wait. Drum roll.
What question have I not asked you that you would have wished I had?
What question have you asked me that I wish you would have? Um, yeah, no, maybe, yeah, maybe. Am I optimistic about the future of talent and HR? Maybe that's
Are
the.
you optimistic about the future of talent in HR?
Well, it's great, Ron, now that you ask that particular question. Now, I'm saying that tongue in cheek because I think there is a big narrative out there that it's all doom and gloom and, it's such a tough time and the environment is really tough, which I think there is some truth to that. But I
Hmm.
think it's a very interesting time to be in the talent and in the HR space and domain, and there's so much opportunity that we can tap into. But it is going to call on us to be a little bit more courageous and to be able to let go of a lot of things of the past and embrace some of the new things there. But I think it's a good news narrative. It's a positive narrative that we do need to tap into. And it's not about, oh, doom, gloom, we don't have the skills, we don't have the talent, everything is kind of too complex, everything is going down the drain. That's not where we are today. But it does not mean that we should be waiting for people to define our future. So maybe that helps.
Yeah, speechless.
Don't know
You're
whether that's a good
amazing.
or a bad thing.
I think it's just ridiculous. I don't think more, inspiration can fit into one podcast. So we might have to put a little, ribbon around it and see you on stage. I think that's going to be very interesting. The last and final segment is about quotes. That's all it is. Do you have favorite quotes or, inspiring insights to share with the people, which we can cut into 5 seconds and make that attention economy buzz?
Yeah, so I grew up in South Africa, so I think my favorite quote comes from an African proverb that still talks about the fact if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that remains, one of my key things that I always talk about whenever there's a difficult decision to make about how we bring people along.
That's one. You want to do another 21 of these, or are you okay?
No, I think that one's okay.
No,
One.
I think that one's okay. I'll just add an extra one, which is yours. Data is meant to keep things moving. I think that's a very, very nice one. I'm definitely putting in my quote set and
Good.
yelling it at people. So it's going to be good. I would love to thank you for your energy and your time and all the wisdom you shared with us today. And look forward to seeing you here in Amsterdam in September.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ron. Much appreciated and look forward to it.
Absolutely. Same here. So thank you everyone also for listening. It was an insightful conversation. I think it's cool to see how we continue to navigate this entire landscape that keeps on changing on global talent strategy. And I'm sure everyone listening took something away from today's podcast. I'm 100% sure of that. So be sure to join us for GTSI 2025. It's in Amsterdam, it's in September, and be part of the future of workforce transformation. Until next time, stay ahead of the curve. Bye.